Good afternoon, everyone, and this is Yawar and Nabil of Cambrian Explosion here to bring you yet another very exciting episode. Following on from our last episode, we want to discuss Jimmy Dore's Toronto show a little bit more in depth. So we thought you might enjoy the discussion.
Yeah, we're gonna. So last time we talked more about the landscape in which Jimmy Dore operates, and this time around, and he says this himself, right? He says that the the media has left a wide landscape for him to operate within, um, and we talked about what does that mean. Now we're going to cover a bit more on specific topics
Yeah, and
that
by
he
the way,
covered.
Jimmy Dore is not unique in this space, right? There
Yeah,
are many commentators nowadays, like from Russell Brand to Joe Rogan to
Jordan
XYZ,
Peterson.
Jordan Peterson,
Anybody is these days getting into it.
anybody who has any amount of fame or notoriety nowadays has some talk show. Even Brie Larson of Ms. Marvel, one day, sorry, what is it? Captain Marvel tried to do a YouTube channel
Yeah,
a few years ago.
yeah, yeah.
So
So it's a very interesting space. But let's dive big deeper on the big three four topics that currently he touched upon. They also are related in some form or the other to the landscape, the technology landscape that we live in.
mhm.
So I'd love to get your take on some of the topics that you thought were interesting to dive a bit deeper into.
Yeah, I felt that Dore had a very he built up to it, but he certainly came out as fairly anti-vax, and he made some very interesting points, which I felt were non sequiturs in a way.
Hmm.
That he talked about
Hmm.
vaccines, and he at one point he literally came out and said that they contain poison. He made certain jokes. Of course, now I have to say that the audience, the majority of the audience, found everything very, very entertaining. Dor was getting, huge amounts of applause and clapping and cheers. Of course, this is a self-selected audience, right? People who paid $50 to come and see his show. So,
Yeah.
of course, they're going to enjoy what he has to say. People who won't enjoy it won't come. But he said some interesting things. Like, for example, one of the jokes that he made was that uh, when he went to get the COVID vaccine originally, they told him that, oh, okay, the vaccine shot is done. So that was it. And he said, oh, that was it. Okay, so I can go home now. And they were like, oh, no, you have to wait here for 15 minutes. We have to monitor you in case you die.
Hmm.
So, he was playing this up for dramatic effect. But what he forgot to mention, I think, is that this is a standard procedure for every vaccine, right? Like even when I go and get my flu shot at
Hmm.
the in late in the year before the winter comes, uh, every time I've gotten my flu shot for the
Hmm.
before COVID was ever a thing, they would tell me to wait in the Shoppers Drug Mart for 15-20 minutes in case I had an allergic reaction
Hmm.
to the vaccine shot, and which I did. I would just browse around in the STM store and wait for the 15-20 minutes to finish up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I felt like he made some interesting jokes. He got some good punchlines and he got some good laughs. But many of these things were following similar non-logics, which don't really hold up if you scrutinize them too much. I felt like they were designed in such a way that people who already agree on these topics will find them very funny, but people who don't agree with them on that topic will immediately see through it. People who agree won't try to overanalyze it like I just did, right? Like they'll just
Yeah.
find it
Yeah.
funny.
Which is a very poignant way of putting it, because I do think that as a comedian he does take liberties in simplifying things. Um,
I'm sure all comedians do that.
the reason I say this is that, as far as if you watch the Jimmy Dore show, he has doctors and he has other evidence, and you can disagree with whether or not that evidence is valuable or not, or is trustworthy or not. But he does bring for all of this his own set of evidence. So the people who are coming over there watching his comedy show probably follow his YouTube show, probably have seen that evidence that he has presented, you know, and uh, and again on this, you can there are times I agree with his evidence, and I have times where I disagree with his evidence. Sometimes the things that he ends up presenting are absolute BS as well.
Mm-hmm.
um, Keep in mind, he's not an expert. He says that himself. He's a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And his job as a comedian is putting together a concrete narrative which his audience will resonate with. So you are absolutely right when you point that out, because that's exactly him doing his job as a comedian, not as a news anchor. He's the first one to say he's not a news anchor, or a news person, or a journalist, to put it more appropriately. But I see where you're coming from, and why that can be. As I said, it's a very important point, because um, it can it can obscure it can I can't say that word,
Obfuscate?
yeah, you say it for me. The A lot of in-depth information that needs to be discussed, right? And it does need to come with that kind of a disclaimer that, hey, you do need to go check up what is being said.
So,
Yeah.
you just touched on this point. Uh, Dore calls himself a non-expert and calls himself a comedian.
Yeah.
But he straight up gave medical advice. I don't see it. There's any other way to look at it. Like, he talked about how ivermectin should be used to treat COVID-19, or at least he couched his argument in such a way that it makes you feel like it's an obvious choice.
because
to use
because there are
ivermectin.
countries where ivermectin is being used to treat, and
Mhm.
there are reports coming out of there. So
Mhm.
when he's saying this, he has already presented in his show at least two or three pieces of evidence
Mhm.
where globally countries have used ivermectin.
Mhm.
There are reports coming out for COVID treatment.
Right, but he specifically mentioned that it's a WHO approved list of essential medicines, which may be true, but it doesn't follow that WHO recommends it for ivermectin. In fact, WHO
No, no, no.
recommends it
The reason
only.
the reason he says that is because what happened with ivermectin, and that's contextual, right? What happened with ivermectin is the reason it picked up is when CNN, when the whole Sanjay Gupta thing happened, CNN was going around calling it a horse dewormer. Almost all the major mainstream news outlets were calling, and not mentioning that it is actually a WHO approved list of essentials. So he's just making the counterpoint, and people who watch his show know this. So he's a comedian, and self-referencing in arts, repetition and self-referencing in arts is part of the art form itself. So I follow where you're coming from, right? And
Yeah, I don't believe by any stretch that the mainstream media always offers good guidance to the public. For example, I very well remember when COVID initially was starting up,
yeah,
in the Western Hemisphere, back in like March, April 2020.
yeah,
That the mainstream media was very, very, very anti-masking, and they would say that, oh, you don't need masks,
yeah,
and Anthony Fauci would say that, you don't need a mask. You
yeah,
shouldn't use masks. You should
yeah,
leave masks for the professionals. You don't know how to wear a mask properly, so it's not
yeah,
going to help you.
yeah,
And later it turned out that they were worried about was a shortage of masks for the actual hospital and clinical professionals.
yeah,
They wanted to keep supplies of masks for the the doctors and nurses, which, while it's while that's a that's a fine goal. That's obviously what you should do. You should have people on the front lines who should be protected
Yes.
with protective gear, but you shouldn't lie about the effectiveness of the thing. While saying that you don't need it because it can't protect you, and you're also saying that we need it because it will protect us. So it makes it obvious that you're lying. So
Yeah.
I very well remember that mainstream media has dropped the ball on COVID many times.
Yeah. 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 And I think the point around this, the aspects of COVID that I think are for me the bigger takeaway than what Jimmy Dore is mentioning. It's a reverse of what Jimmy Dore is saying. It's Jimmy Dore is a symptom of something, and that symptom is that because of these issues, there was a lack of trust in media before, but it has really during COVID, people are locked up at home. Okay, they're all, if you're working, you don't have the time to think about these kind of things. You're too busy doing other things. You're living life. But if you're locked up at home and you're being told wear a mask, this, that, and then when you watch media, all you can do is watch TV all day. When you watch that and then they're flip-flopping on the story, you have the opportunity to analyze that. And what COVID has done is, and you can probably see it in not just Jimmy Dore, but as we've mentioned, there's so many other people who are now riding the bandwagon of creating these media shows, right? The decline in trust on media, the decline in trust on other authority figures. So it's not just media; it's the FDA, it's the CDC, it's your regional government in the US, particularly, somewhat in Canada as well. Because I think that's also a part of what we're looking at is impact on
Sure, I
Canada.
agree with you completely about decline in trust. But all I find funny is the fact that people are saying that there's a decline in trust in mainstream media. So what are we going to do? Oh, we're just going to trust the non-mainstream media. That's going to fix. Those guys are going to fix the trust problem.
No, I don't think that that's what other people are saying. The other people are looking for sources of trustworthiness, and the thing is that when there are no sources of trustworthiness, echo chambers become your sources of trustworthiness, and echo chambers tend to be conspiracy focused. What you're talking about to me is more of a symptom, and if you have trustworthy sources which are not allowed to operate right now in media, that often there would be one that comes out, The Intercept will get bought out. So it's just part of life. That's how things are operating right now.
You might be hearing some interesting noises in the background. We've got some pretty crazy traffic nowadays, thanks to the end of summer and the last few days of the Canadian National Exhibition. Uh, People have discovered liberal use of honking is apparently a great strategy to stay stuck in traffic even longer.
Yeah, it's hilarious what people do. But I think that just cleared up. Okay, back to our show.
Back to the show. So Dore made some points that I actually agree with. Like he made me realize that there are some issues where people are pretty much aligned across the board. For example, he was talking about how people are fighting identity politics wars, but the real issue is the problem of that working classes are being pretty much squeezed out by the ruling classes. That's the real problem that we have in society today. You have, and it's obvious, right? Like you have a very few billionaires who own like what the top the 80% of the world's wealth.
Yeah.
While the majority of the population are just kind of like slaving away every day, and then just hoping for a few days off here and there to live their lives.
Yeah, I think that's a topic which is at this point, particularly because of both the inflationary pressures that are there, as well as the housing issue. across all of North America. You know, it's so interesting that the population growth in most of developed countries has slowed down to the point that population is pretty much stagnant, yet we have housing issues. We don't have enough
Mm.
houses. How is it that we have gone from having enough houses, or even if we were short, we're still building more houses and our populations have gone stagnant, right? There is definitely a failure of logic, failure of systems in there somewhere.
Mm. Yeah, I think this issue has much broad agreement across everybody who's affected by it, like across left and right.
Yeah.
Uh, every party everywhere. But the only people who seem to be not that impacted by it are the ruling classes, and that's I agree with Dore about that point for sure.
Yeah. There was another point that you brought up that you agree with him.
Yeah, he was talking about the endless wars, right?
Hmm.
So you know, uh, people worship Barack Obama, but he came in and he started what, like 7 wars around the world.
Yeah.
He approved more drone strikes. He created the migrant prison camps and cages that people blame Trump for, and and then people worship Barack Obama and gave him a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
And then Biden comes in, and we've got a couple more wars, new wars now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
what's going on? Why? And also, he made the very good point that the American Congress blindly approved billions and billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine, but they won't even spend a few $1 billion to solve our own homelessness crisis
Yeah.
right here in the U.S. So it's very, very interesting where the money is going.
Yeah, and I think that, bringing this to a Canadian context, right? My thought process is how much of that is happening in Canada as well. How much of it could be, how much homelessness has increased in Toronto? How much has Canada contributed to the Ukraine war? How much should have it been spent fixing issues back at home?
Yeah, the Canadian homelessness thing, the home prices here in Canada, that's an issue. That's a separate topic, and we should definitely touch on that in a future discussion. I think like that we can keep going on and on about that particular topic.
Yeah.
And there are many different aspects to it. There's the Ford Greenbelt scandal that's happening. There's this blind expectation that they're just going to create more suburbs out of the fertile Greenbelt in Ontario, which seems to me like the craziest thing ever. Like, these people are straight up insane. But I don't want to get too much into that right now because I'm going to keep talking about that for hours.
Which means that you guys should get ready for an episode 3 around homelessness, a follow-up episode around homelessness,
the housing crisis,
and homelessness that we're going to do, as well as we should cover a bit of around inflation and what's driving that as well. Just want to open up for any other thoughts or point around Jimmy Dore before we
final thoughts on Jimmy Dore.
Final thoughts on Jimmy Dore.
I mean, I found it interesting to go and look at this new perspective. I can't really say that I have too much interest in becoming a Jimmy Dore follower. But I definitely appreciated this opportunity because I haven't been to this kind of a show in a while. Actually, the last time I went to this kind of show was, and it wasn't even a political show, but it was several years ago, Russell Brand's Messiah Complex tour in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually my last, I guess, stand-up comedy show.
And
anyway,
this is about being able to listen to diverse opinions and being able to understand different points of view. And you guys, as our listeners, you can also tell us what to go listen to. If there's a diverse opinion, if there's a different opinion that you guys think that we should be hearing, please let us know. There's comments, there's ways to get to reach us, and we'd be glad to hear you guys out.
Absolutely, always happy to listen.
And take care, guys.
Keep listening. Bye.